Hello and welcome to Maths with Mr. Holmes. What will you learn today? Let me tell you. It's Equivalent Fractions, Part 2, Fraction Wall 2. We have our steps to learning written up clearly so you can follow along step by step as we go. As we're looking at equivalent fractions, we're going to remind ourselves what they are. Equivalent fractions are fractions that have different numerators and denominators, but represent the same value or part of a whole. We likened it to bars of chocolate. If we were to have 2 bars of chocolate exactly the same size, but one was cut into 2 large pieces and the other was cut into 4 smaller pieces, how much would we need to have of both to eat the same amount? So at this top one, if we were to eat one large part out of the 2, we'd be eating 1/2. To eat the same amount from the smaller chunks, we would need 2 out of the 4, or 2/4. So 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. Now, let's have a look at our fraction wall. And that's our first step. If we have a look, it's made up of different sized bricks or pieces. The largest brick is the top one, which is 1 whole. Then cut into halves, thirds, quarters, getting smaller and smaller as we go further down, until the smallest chunk right at the bottom is 1/12. Now, let's choose a fraction and shade it in. With our fraction wall 2, we're going to do something slightly different. In fraction wall 1, we looked at unit fractions, where we only had one piece, or the numerator was 1. We are going to have a look at non-unit fractions, where we have more than one piece. So we'll pick a fraction, quarters, and we're going to have a look at 1, 2, 3 of them, or 3/4. Next, we're going to have another fraction and shade that in until it is equal. So if you can remember, we'll have a look where that brick finishes, but all the way down in line until we find one. And here we go, we have 8ths. We'll shade enough 8ths in until we have the same amount in total. On to our final step, where we identify the equivalent fractions. So our first one we looked at was quarters, and we had 1, 2, 3 of those quarters, or 3/4, 3 out of those 4 equal pieces. Our second fraction we looked at was 8ths, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those 8ths, or 6/8. 6 out of 8 equal pieces. Our final step then, we've identified the equivalent fractions. 3/4 is the same as 6/8. Okay, let's have a look at another one. We'll follow our steps, we'll look at our fraction wall. Next, we'll choose a fraction and shade it in. This time I think I'm going to have a look at 5ths. Remember, we have a non-unit fraction, so I'm going to choose 1, 2, 3, 4 this time. On to step 3, where I'm going to choose another fraction. needs to be shaded in until it's equal. So go to the end where this brick finishes, fifths, all the way down until in line, and we can see here tenths, and we want to shade in the same amount altogether. Our final step then, where we identify the equivalent fractions. Our first one was fifths. We had 1, 2, 3, 4 fifths. 4 out of the 5 equal pieces. And our second fraction was tenths, where we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tenths. Or 8 out of 10 equal pieces. We've identified equivalent fractions. We have 4 fifths is equivalent to 8 tenths. On we go then. This time we're going to show you something a little bit different, just as we did in fraction wall 1. We're going to look at multiple equivalents. The two we've looked at first of all, we've just identified a pair of equivalent fractions. This time we're going to see how many we can find. So let's have a look at our fraction wall. We'll choose a fraction to shade in. I'm going to choose thirds this time. I'm going to choose 2 of them, so it's a non-unit of fraction. I next need to choose another fraction and shade that in until it's equal. So follow the brick down. You can see it's in line here. It's the same as 6. Follow it down again. We have ninths. We'll follow it down again, and we have twelfths. Our final step then, where we're going to identify the equivalent fractions. So we started with thirds, and we had 1, 2 of those thirds, or 2 out of 3 equal pieces. Sixths, 1, 2, 3, 4 sixths, 4 out of those 6 equal pieces. We then had ninths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ninths, 6 out of 9 equal pieces. And finally, we had these really tiny bricks down at the bottom, twelfths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 twelfths. 8 out of those 12 equal pieces. So we've identified those equivalent fractions. 2 thirds is the same as 4 sixths, is the same as 6 ninths, is the same as 8 twelfths. So, down to you then. Follow the steps to learning and see how many equivalent fractions you can find. It's as easy as that. See you again soon for some more maths fun.